Mary Ann Cotton ended her macabre career in 1873, taking with her the title of England's first female serial killer. But the silence wouldn't last long. 15 years later, the damp, shadowy streets of London would be the scene of an even greater terror. A faceless, identityless killer. One who would transform Whitechapel into a landscape of eternal fear. In 1888, the world would learn a name that would never be forgotten. Jack the Ripper. After Mary Ann Cotton, England believed it had witnessed the worst. But in 1888, terror took shape in the narrow, foggy streets of Whitechapel. A name without a face, a killer without an identity. The world would know the eternal enigma, Jack the Ripper. London, late 19th century. A scene of poverty, prostitution, and poorly lit alleys. Women in vulnerable situations wandered at night, without imagining that the city was about to be forever marked by blood. Between August and November 1888, 5 women were brutally murdered. Mary Ann Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, and Mary Jane Kelly. Known as the Canonical Five, they were found with deep cuts and mutilations that revealed hatred and surgical precision. The killer acted quickly, cruelly, and disappeared like a ghost in the mist. Mysterious letters arrived at the police and in the newspapers, signed with a name that would echo through eternity, Jack the Ripper. Were they authentic or just a hoax? No one knew for sure. But fear spread like wildfire, and Whitechapel sank into paranoia. Who was Jack? Many people were named as possible culprits. Montague John Druitt, lawyer and professor. He was found dead in the River Thames shortly after the murders. Many believe his tragic end coincided with the end of the murders. Aaron Kosminski, a Polish barber, committed to an asylum shortly after the crimes. Police documents suggest he was a strong suspect. Michael Ostrog, a criminal and con artist with a history of violence, who was also included on the list of possible killers. Francis Tumblety, an American quack doctor, imprisoned in London at the time and with a history of hatred towards women. Prince Albert Victor, grandson of Queen Victoria, a bold conspiracy theory that suggested a cover-up by the royal family. Each suspect seemed to fit part of the puzzle, but never enough to close the mystery. Jack the Ripper wasn't just a killer. He became a symbol. An immortal ghost who still walks the line between history and legend. And his identity, lost in the Whitechapel fog, may never be revealed. But for more than a century, the name Jack the Ripper remained an unsolvable enigma. Letters, theories, suspects, but no definitive answer. Until, more recently, science entered the scene. Forgotten remains, preserved by chance, were analyzed using DNA technology. Among all the suspects, one name resonated most strongly. Aaron Kosminski, the Polish barber, admitted to an asylum shortly after the crimes. But could this finally be the truth? Or just another shadow cast over the myth? Jack continues to elude between legend and reality. We have gathered more information to bring you the truth behind the mask of one of the greatest icons of criminal mystery of all time. For over a century, Jack the Ripper reigned as history's greatest criminal enigma. Letters, theories, thousands of pages of investigation, and still, no face, no name confirmed. But recently, science has attempted to illuminate what time has obscured. Could the identity of the world's most notorious killer finally be revealed? In 1888, the streets of Whitechapel were stained with blood. 5 women brutally murdered. And a killer who vanished into the night. Since then, dozens of names have been floated as suspects: doctors, noblemen, butchers, even royalty. But none of them has ever been proven. At the scene of the murder of Catherine Eddowes, found dead on September 30, 1888, there was a shawl, which was taken home by one of the police officers present. Years later, in 2007, it would be auctioned off and purchased by Russell Edwards. The English author and writer claims to have discovered the killer's identity through a test performed on the shawl found with the killer's 4th victim. The writer submitted the garment to DNA testing, which found blood stains corresponding to a descendant of the victim, as well as semen. In 2 books, Naming Jack the Ripper, and Naming Jack the Ripper, The Definitive Reveal, Edwards points to Kosminski as the serial killer. But experts have described the case as very shaky, questioning the validity of DNA that was reportedly left on a shawl for more than a century. In 2014, the case's expert, Andrew Smith, said there was no forensic evidence, and that it was highly unlikely that any DNA evidence on the shawl had not been contaminated over the years and that the cold case was still open. Also in 2014, a group of researchers claimed to have made a historic discovery and, for the first time in decades, had a potentially definitive name for Jack the Ripper. After further DNA testing on the victim's shawl, traces were identified that, according to scientists, corresponded to descendants of one of the prime suspects at the time. Aaron Kosminski. Kosminski was a Polish immigrant and barber who lived in Whitechapel. He had a history of mental instability and was committed to an asylum shortly after the crimes. At the time, internal Scotland Yard documents already named him as a likely culprit. But without concrete evidence, the case never progressed. Sketch, left, of Jack the Ripper at the time of the crimes, and the current creation of what he might have looked like. The revelation caused a worldwide impact. Newspapers announced, Jack the Ripper had finally been unmasked. But it didn't take long for doubts to arise. Critics pointed out flaws in the study, in the preservation of the samples, and even in the way the DNA was compared. For many experts, the supposed evidence was nothing more than a coincidence or a methodological error. Jack, once again, had escaped the grasp of truth. 3 years earlier, a new controversy had apparently arisen that also stirred up commotion surrounding Jack's mysterious case. A new book and a new theory. The book Jack the Ripper, The Most Intelligent Murderer in History, by José Luis Abad, 84 years old, claims that the real culprit would be Chief Inspector Frederick Aberline, responsible for the original investigation of the crimes in 1888.
I became interested in the Jack the Ripper case 7 years ago, and I am convinced that I have finally solved the mystery. I have been a spelling expert since 1975 and spent years collecting important documents, and using my expertise to solve the case.
Abad has been a handwriting expert since 1975 and claims to have compared official documents signed by Aberline with the Ripper's diary, found in Liverpool in 1992. According to him, the writings are nearly identical, proving that Aberline was the diary's author and, therefore, the killer. The diary mentions the name Aberline 24 times, providing even more material for comparison. Abad believes the motive for the crimes was Aberline's deep-seated hatred for his own mother, for being an illegitimate child. He projected this resentment onto his victims. But, the theory is radical and controversial, as Aberline was considered one of Scotland Yard's most respected detectives. The case is extraordinary, and the solution is almost as shocking as the crimes themselves. Today, more than 130 years later, the identity of Jack the Ripper still divides opinions. Was Aaron Kosminski the killer who terrorized Whitechapel? Or perhaps no one better suited to stage the crimes than the hunter himself, protected by his uniform, fueled by obsession, and invisible to the eyes of the law he swore to serve? Or was the real culprit never even considered among the suspects? Perhaps the answer is lost forever. And perhaps that's what keeps the myth alive. Jack isn't just a man, he's an eternal shadow, hidden in the London fog. Was Aaron Kosminski Jack? Or did the detective himself have a split personality? What do you think? Leave your comment and activate the bell to follow all the details of history's darkest minds.